Hi, welcome back to Cracking the Cryptic, where after yesterday's fireworks with Derek Neal's new method for solving Sudoku, I thought we'd do something completely different today. This is a puzzle that somebody has requested or suggested that we take a look at via our email account, which is crackingthecryptic@gmail.com. So if you do have any questions or comments or suggestions for us, do email us. We do try and, we certainly read everything, we do try and reply where we can. Now, this puzzle is called Area 51, and you can find it on, I'll put a link in the description, but it's a website called crazydad.com, where they specialise in certain types of logic problem. And this is a logic problem I've never seen before, and it's a sort of hybrid of several different types of classic Japanese pencil puzzle. So what we've got here is, it's called Area 51 because we have to create a fence to fence in the aliens, and you can see there's two blue aliens on this particular grid. This is a hard puzzle apparently, and we have to make sure cactuses are outside Area 51. And apart from that, everything else you can see is a variant on a Japanese pencil puzzle. So the black and the white discs here are Meisu logic. So let's remind ourselves how that works. In Meisu, a black disc has to have a right-angled hinge like this in terms of the loop, and it has to extend for 2 in each direction. So this corner square is in fact forced to be exactly like I've shown here. Now white squares, on the other hand, cannot have a bend in them. So you have to continue through the white square, and the only other important thing to know about white discs is that the loop must turn in one of, so this arrangement here would be broken. It must turn on either side once it's gone one square up. So well, it can of course turn both ways like that, but what it can't do ever is extend 2 line segments in both directions once it's gone through the line. Let's put that one back in. Now the numbers here are simple slitherlink. So slitherlink, for those of you not familiar, that means that in terms of the loop, this 3 cell here has to have 3 edges of loop. The 2's obviously have 2 edges. The easiest one is 0. So this square will have no loop components. And then finally, we've also got this circled 7 here. Now this is a cave logic. Now I've done a video on cave logic before. It comes up a lot in the US Puzzle Championship. And what this means is A, this square is inside the loop, and B, this can see 7 cells looking horizontally and vertically in terms of the internal area it sees of the loop. So if, let's do an example, let's imagine that the loop went like this, something like that. The internal area at this point is 1 square here, 2 squares, 3 squares, 4 squares. So if this was the loop, we would know that we couldn't fence off here, because it would have to come 5, 6, I've lost my track of length, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I think it would have to be like that in terms of where this 7 cage could see. So that's the only other criteria, and what I'm going to try and do for you now is to solve this puzzle. Now I haven't done many of these. I've tried a couple online. I have to say the interface is very nice, so I definitely think it's worth taking a look at this site. It's quite decent. Now I suspect the puzzles are computer generated. I don't know that for sure, but I suspect so because there seem to be an astronomical number of them. So one thing I'm going to be looking out for, and I'll try and comment on once we've done the puzzle, is whether I think this is a this is good logic, or is this, does it sort of dissolve into a point where we have to make a random guess type thing. That can happen with some of the computer algorithms used to create puzzles of this nature. But let's go for it. Let's try and create our Area 51. So you can see this square here. We know it has to have a hinge, so that's going to have to come up 2. And I guess this 0 here interacts with this black disc. because the black disk can't come down this way and it can't come that way either. So it's going to have to do this. Remember, one of the things we're going to have to keep track of here is which squares are inside the loop. This is very important logic in these puzzles. And you can see anything obviously on the perimeter that has a black line, then inside that perimeter must be in the loop. We know this is in the loop because that's part of the rules of the puzzle, and we know that the aliens are in the loop because we've got to put them inside area 51, and we know this cactus is outside the loop. So let's put all that in and carry on filling in the puzzle. So this dot here, we know it must come out like that. And there's our first clever bit of logic, or slightly clever bit of logic. Let's think about which way this can go. Now if this extends left from here, watch what happens. We know the 3 obviously has to have 3 edges. Now we know this 3 is inside the loop because obviously the perimeter has surrounded it like this. But it can't have the same parity as the alien. So this is a problem. This is not going to work because the implication of what we've drawn is that this is inside the loop, but we know the alien must also be inside the loop. So we know this in fact must extend in the other direction, where it must come up. Now one of the rules of Slitherlink is when a line segment hits a 3 cell, you can always put in the adjacent or the opposite sides like that. You don't know yet whether it's going to come this way or this way. Well, we do in fact, but you can always put those 2 line segments in because they'll be forced. Now obviously I've just shown you, but if that was the extension, now we're broken. This line cannot escape. So in fact we know that goes like that. And let's start putting in some more labelling. So it's got to do that. Now this hinge here, around here, means this must be in the loop, this must be in the loop, those are all outside the loop. Now, again we can look at this 3 cell here. So if we think about it, we can't ever have that arrangement because now this top area here can't go anywhere. So we know that this must be in the loop. Now if this is in the loop, so is this. And therefore this square here is inside the loop because we've managed to get this black line at the top of the grid. So now look at it. We know this is in the loop and we know this is in the loop. So we cannot differentiate. We cannot have that line. And we know we need 3 around the edge, so that must be true. Now we know the 7 is in the loop, so we need to come down like that. And this can only go in one place. So actually we're starting to build up a picture. And very importantly, this 7 is now restricting what can happen because this 7 sees 1, 2, must see 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cells. So this line is forced, and we can write in all of these cells must be inside the loop like that. And that is going to be very nice. Look, we can go all the way down there. Now this is hitting a 3 again. We've talked about that. That must do that. And now if we extend that this way, again we have a problem. This 3 now can't get out, so we know that must be like that. And we really are starting to cook with gas now. Now again, we can see here we have an inside segment separated by a line. So this cell must be outside the loop. And the moment we spot that, we can fill in the parity of everything that's to the left-hand side, if you like, of this line segment. We can do the same on this side. This is all forced. Let's extend this one more. This 0, obviously, we have an X there, so that must come down. That must come out. And now we've filled in our 2 line segments of this 2 cell, so we must take that one further forward. Let's fill in some more logic there. Right, and there's a few things I can see here, so what should we talk about? Let's talk about this 3. Now, the fact that this 3 and this 0 are in diagonally adjacent cells is important because it rules out some of the options for the 3. Let me show you. That is obviously broken because this cannot now go anywhere. We can't close the loop and it can't go away because it's going to break this 0 cell. So this arrangement is not possible, and the same is obviously true of that arrangement. So if we know that we can never have this 3 in either of those orientations, then we know these two things are forced. And look at that. The important thing here is this line segment is differentiating this cell's parity from the blue. So this must be like that. And look at this. This is a lovely puzzle actually. So now this 3 and the cactus are the same parity. So we know this line is not possible, which completes the 3. So that's forced. Now we can go blue, blue like that. Right. Now we know this line must extend. Oops, sorry. So it must go up this way. This 2 we haven't done anything with yet, so we must complete that like that. And here's a classic slitherlink type arrangement. We have 2 adjacent 2's now with a line coming into these like this. Now we have to think about what the options are here. So let's have a think about this 2 first. Is it possible that the 2 line segments are like that? Well, clearly not, because this line segment is now broken. It has nowhere to go. So that's not possible. Is it possible? Is that possible? Again, this is broken because this line segment now can't get out without breaking the condition of the 2. So if we know that the sort of opposite sides don't work, we know that exactly one of these is true and exactly one of these is true. So in other words, this either goes like that or it goes like that. That's absolutely forced. But we've got a similar thing going on down here. So let's look at what happens here. So if this goes like this and this extends, now we have a broken puzzle because this line segment here cannot go up, so it would go like that and we get an enclosed loop within the in the grid, which is not allowed. So we can't have this arrangement. In other words, this must do that, which is nice because that allows us to do all sorts of things. We can do all of that. We can extend this. Now we don't yet know for sure whether this comes down or it comes this way. So we're going to have to leave this unfilled, I think, and think harder about the rest of the puzzle. Well, one thing we can look at is this 3. Because we have a line segment coming into it, we know that's true. So what could we do next? Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a lot going on here, and the fact that this has to turn at some point, I think, is the critical thing. So let's look at this. If this line comes this way, the puzzle will break. Now try and see if you can see why that's the case. It's not easy to spot, but let me show you. So if that is how this line extends, this 3 obviously goes this way, but now this white digit or white circle hasn't turned yet, so it would have to turn here. And that's going to do that. Now we can't close off this area. We know there's a single area. So that would be the next move we would have to make. And how do we fill this 2 now? We can't. Because not only can we not do that because this point is isolated, but it also breaches this circle here. We know the circle cannot have a turn in it. So in fact, once we get to this position, we know this must extend like that, and that's extremely powerful because look, both of these white circles now need to turn in the next position, otherwise they'll break, because they've extended. This circle has extended 2 downwards, so it needs to turn in its upward plane, and this one has extended 2 upwards, so it needs to turn here. Now if it needs to turn here, it can't turn into a corner, so that is forced, and look what that does. We now know the parity of those 2 cells and the parity of all of these cells down at the bottom, and I am hoping that might finish the puzzle off. So let's go like that. We know that we can't separate these lines, these all have the same parity now, so that is forced. Let's fill in all the yellows just to make ourselves feel like we're doing things in a structured way. So we end up in this position, and what do we do next? Well, this 2 has to come in because we need 2 line segments. Now if I close this off, what's going to happen? So if I do that, we've isolated this area again. Oops. So this is definitely not right. We cannot close this loop. It must come up. It must do that. Which means we now know the parity of those squares. This comes down like this, and all we have to figure out now is how to fill this 2. And again, it's clever logic actually. This puzzle has been nicely designed because there are 2 ways we could do this, but one of them is going to breach the condition, because if we come this way, which is fine in a way, look what happens. We isolate this area from its friends. So we know in fact that we must not do that. It must be a vertical one like this. And there we go. It took me 28 minutes apparently. Well, I don't think it did. It took me 17. And then you always get some sort of quote as a congratulations. So I think this is a nice puzzle. I've not seen it before. It appeals to me that it combines the logic of these different Japanese puzzle types, and it does it in a very nice way. So I applaud Crazy Dad. I think it's a good site. Do have a go at their puzzles, and we'll be back again tomorrow with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.